I kid you not, I was literally a doormat in elementary school when I decided to sub one day. Now, I usually do not sub for elementary school or just go into elementary school. I just knew early on that I really liked middle school and high school. So one day this is before I got my long-term sub position, I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna try elementary school just to switch it up. And so I get to this school and I get there and I read the lesson plans. One particular thing that stood out to me was the teachers had said that there's one student who is not nice to substitute teachers. They're not sure why, but that particular student's just not nice. And just don't take it personally and don't escalate the situation. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, yeah, that teacher was absolutely correct. Not the nicest kid in the world. But honestly, I feel like he wasn't so much of the problem. I didn't feel like I was being harassed by him. Anyways, but so as the morning went on, I was like so excited to be there. I tried to warmly invite them in the classroom with a hello, it's so nice to see you, good morning, and stuff. And that went well for the most part. And as time goes on, I wanted to say the rules for the class. Now, mind you, I did not have any rules or expectations for the students at this time. I was still like new to substitute teaching and just trying to gain more experience is what I guess I could say. So I was like, earlier that morning I was trying to like think of rules or whatever, and I found like a class like poster that said rules, so that's what I went off of. Those kids didn't care, so I was just like, okay, like whatever. So we go through and we start with reading, I believe it was. And so I'm handing out this worksheet that after, like, I was told to read it out loud, and it was on chocolate chip cookies. And I was like, oh, this will be fun. And I was like trying to like have the students be enthusiastic about reading about chocolate chip cookies. And so I'm handing it out, and then they were going to be doing the questions on their own. So I was to read it out loud and then do the questions. They do the questions on their own. So I'm reading it halfway through the first paragraph, and one student goes,
You know you are a bitch, right?
and I was like, oh, how did you get that out of reading chocolate chip cookies? But I moved on, just ignored it, and I just was like, I'm not gonna like escalate the situation, not gonna like let him know that hurt my feelings. Meanwhile, I feel like I'm far from that. So we're reading, and next thing you know, things are flying at my head. The kid that I was told about, who's not nice to subs, he was throwing his erasers at my head, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I told him to stop. He didn't stop, so I took him to the office. Well, I didn't take him to the office. I made him go to the office, and then I called. Disruption there. So now we are in math class, and they're sitting there, and I'm teaching the lesson, which I had no idea what I was doing. Not because I didn't know the math, but math changed from when I was in school, and so I was just kind of following the curriculum. And this girl starts like yelling at me because I did it wrong, which I was doing it, I guess, the way that I had learned how to do it. Not that that really matters, that she was like, you're doing it wrong. For some reason, I took it personally, and I escalated the situation, and I yelled at her. And next thing you know, she went, and I shouldn't laugh because it was not funny. She went to all of her classmates' desks and just ransacked it. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know what to do. So I just like stood there like, oh my gosh, you know? So instead of running for help, I tried hard to get her out of the classroom to talk to her. And she's like, I'm not touching her. She's like,
don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. And
she's getting mad and she starts screaming on the top of her lungs. I was so embarrassed. I was like, what just happened? What just happened? So after math class, they did go to a special, and I could not tell you how special that was to just have some time to myself. I was like, oh my gosh. Rough. Then, this happened twice. This was not my day, but this literally happened twice. After I got them from their special, which I think was physical education, I always like stood at the door and I let the students come in to the door, and then I would close the door behind them. And I kept the door locked just in case of a lockdown drill. Well, the student who was not nice to subs slammed the door, like pushed me out of the door and slammed the door shut. And now the students are in the room by themselves with me outside of the door. And I was like, oh, great. So I went across the hall and I told the teacher, and she got keys and opened the door, and she took a couple students who we found was going through my backpack, going through all of my stuff in my wallet. I was like, what the heck? This is 3rd grade, by the way. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? I had to do lunch, and I had to go down there and monitor them during lunch. And it just was like, they just stared at me, like glared at me, or just like, they didn't like me. And you don't have to like me. Maybe they did like me. I don't know. But I was just very sad at the way that they were just so mean to me. I was like, I don't understand. And then I had time. So they had a recess aide who took them outside, and they enjoyed that time. But I had to come back and get them. And so the kids were lining up at the door. And so it was like other classes other than mine. So it was all like 3rd grade together. So then the teachers would come and pick them up. So I'm going to pick them up, and my students see me, so they start lining up. Well, 2 boys decided they wanted to run. And when I mean run, they ran off of the school's property. And that aide looked at me, and I looked at her like, should I go get them? And she turns to me and goes, you go get them. And I was like, what? I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, what about the other students? What, you know? And so all of the teachers are looking at me like, looking at each other. And anyways, luckily, the teachers decided, one teacher was like, no, I'm going to talk to them. This is a serious consequence. They do not act like this. This is absolutely inappropriate from a 3rd grader. So they were like, we will get the students and we'll bring them back to class, whatever. So I was like, okay. So she did. And then as we were coming back from recess, I didn't learn the first time, but that same student who didn't run away locked me out. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what the heck? So once I got back in the room, settled down, and I was like, you know what? Let's take this time to talk about like kindness. And I was like, I'll just take like 3 minutes just to talk about kindness and how kindness helps shape people into or makes people want to keep the kindness going on. It's just trying to do something to help them understand like they weren't being kind, but we can work on it type of thing. They started yelling at me. Not all the students, but like just started yelling, and they were like, you are, one of them was like, you are not a good teacher. And I'm sitting there like, I know. At this point, I know. Like, I don't have the opportunity right now. You're not letting me, So what I did, I got up, I held back tears. I got up, packed my bag, and I went to the door. And I stood like face to face with the door, and I felt like God was in my ear saying, don't give up just yet. Don't give up on these students. Don't leave, because if you want a career in the education field, you are not being professional right now, and you're not going to have a job ever again if you do this. So it took me like 2 minutes. I sat at the desk after that, calmed down. And then I walked back over to them, and I had a huge discussion about how they are not making me feel welcome, and how I don't like being talked to like this or yelled at or anything. And I didn't yell at them. I just was like, help me understand. I was like, is it something that I'm doing? And they were all like, no. And I'm like, but why are you treating me this way? I would never, ever treat you the way you're treating me. And that took a turn. That took another turn. So for the good, for the best. So I was really happy for that. And for the rest of the time, the students did behave. And then luckily, one good thing happened out of this. So unfortunately, I just broke it by accident, but I remembered this, and every day I see it and it reminds me of this day. But this little girl comes up to me. She goes, Mrs. Watts, I know today was a really bad day for you, but when you were like busy just with the kids who were being bad, I secretly made you this and you didn't notice. And I was like, yeah, I clearly didn't notice, but I was like, thank you so much. This was so kind. And I thought it was so cute, but I accidentally just broke it. And I was like, no. But warms my heart still to this day that some cute little girl made this for me. After that day, I went right to the principals and I apologized. I was like, I don't know what happened back there. And I was like, I usually deal with middle school and high school students. And I just decided to do elementary school. And I was like, I don't even have the words, but I apologize for what I did. So like how today went. And he was like, I get it. And I was like, oh, it wasn't very, I felt like it wasn't a really respectful answer, but he was just like, yeah, like you just have a lot to work on. And I was like, clearly. Okay. So what I learned from that moment, after that day, one, I went home and I drank a ton of wine. And I kind of talked to myself there. And I said to myself, what went wrong? What is it? Like, I love being in the classroom. I love these students. What is the issue? And really what came to mind, and with Pinteresting and YouTubing and all this stuff, it was not setting your expectations. If you are not doing that. Now, I did that in this class. If you remember, I said that earlier. But they could tell I was reading it from a poster on the wall. And I think that was where they kind of were like, we can get away with this one here, And the next time, I kid you not, 2 more times I went to elementary. Actually, that's a lie. I think it was 4 more times. Between 2 and New York and then 2 in Pennsylvania. But after that moment is when I was like, I need to learn class management. I might not be perfect. I'm not a perfect person, but if I do it and I make the effort, it's going to happen. So I made rules for elementary school, for middle school, and for high school. And every time I had a class, I made sure that I stated these rules and I made sure that the students understood. And I was consistent. I decided to be consistent with it, firm, never yelling. And I decided that I wanted to have a consequence. So it would be maybe sitting closer to me, or it would be a trip to the principal's office, whatever I had to do with that, or a trip to see another teacher if you misbehave again, something along those lines. But that's something you have to work out with another teacher if that's okay. So that was my elementary first time subbing elementary, and it was a very stressful one. I'll see you in the next video.